You're 9 years old, starving, abandoned, and your own brother just tried to kill you. Welcome to your first day as you in Genghis Khan's childhood. If you genuinely enjoy these stories and truly want more, feel free to like, maybe subscribe, and settle in, because tonight, before sleep takes you, you'll walk through a childhood that forged a legend. You're 9 years old, and your name is Temujin. Not the name that will one day make emperors wake up screaming, but close enough. Right now, you're just a kid whose biggest worry should be whether you remembered to feed the horses. Instead, you're sitting in the back of a wooden cart, bouncing toward your future in-laws like a sack of very important grain. Your father, Yasuge, is doing what Mongol fathers do best, making political alliances through the time-honored tradition of trading children for brides. You're the commodity. She's probably lovely. The arrangement is definitely practical. Romance? Well, that's what poets are for. And you don't see any poets around here, do you? The steppe stretches endlessly in every direction, a carpet of grass that whispers secrets you're too young to understand. The wind carries the scent of horses, leather, and that particular smell of home that you'll remember decades later, when you're setting other people's homes on fire. But right now, it just smells like Tuesday. Your father explains the plan with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. You'll stay with Borty's family, learn their ways, prove you're worthy of their daughter, and presumably grow into the kind of man who can handle both a wife and a warhorse without embarrassing anyone. Simple, really. What could go wrong? The Olkanud clan receives you with the enthusiasm reserved for expected guests and unexpected gifts. Borty is there, a girl about your age with eyes that suggest she's already calculating whether you're worth the trouble. You like her immediately. She doesn't giggle or hide behind her mother's skirts. She looks at you like you're a puzzle she's planning to solve. The formalities are observed. Hands are shaken, agreements are nodded at, and your father does that thing where adults talk about children as if they're not standing right there. You'll be a fine addition to their family, they say. You'll learn discipline, respect, and probably how to stop slouching, the usual parental fantasies. Then comes the part where your father has to leave. This is normal, this is expected, this is how marriages work on the steppe. Slow courtships that give everyone time to change their minds before the actual commitment. Your father mounts his horse, promises to return, and rides off into the afternoon sun like the hero of some story you'll never get to finish. 3 days later, the messenger arrives. You're learning to braid rope when you see the rider approaching. Something about the way he sits his horse tells you this isn't good news. The adults gather around him, and their voices drop to that particular whisper that means someone's world is about to end. You keep braiding, but your fingers have gone cold. The messenger's words reach you in fragments. Yasuge, Tartars, feast, poison. The adults are nodding grimly, making those sounds people make when they're trying to process information their brains don't want to accept. Your rope falls from your hands. Your father is dead, not dead in battle, which would have been noble, not dead of old age, which would have been natural, dead because he accepted hospitality from the wrong people and apparently trusted the wrong cook. The Tatars, those perpetual enemies of your family, had invited him to share a meal, and he'd said yes because saying no to hospitality is the kind of rudeness that starts wars. Well, they started a war anyway. The details trickle in over the following hours. Your father had been travelling home when he encountered a Tatar gathering. They recognized him. Hard to miss Yasuge the Brave, even when he's trying to mind his own business. They invited him to feast with them. He accepted, because refusing would have been an insult, and insulting people is generally bad for one's health. Ironic, really. The poison was probably in the mutton. Something slow-acting and nasty, designed to let him ride away before the symptoms started. Very considerate of them, really. Your father made it almost home before the sweating began, before the vomiting, before the fever that turned his skin the colour of old parchment. He had just enough time to realise what had happened, and just enough breath to curse his killers before the world went dark. The Olkanud clan's hospitality suddenly feels different, more forced, more temporary. You're no longer the promising young groom-to-be. You're the inconvenient orphan whose value just dropped to approximately nothing. The looks you're getting aren't hostile, yet, but they're not exactly warm either. They're calculating, measuring, deciding whether you're worth keeping around now that your father's protection is gone. 40 finds you sitting alone by the river, throwing stones at nothing in particular. She doesn't say anything at first, just sits beside you and starts throwing stones too. Hers skip better than yours, which is somehow both annoying and comforting. "My father says you'll have to go home," she says eventually. You nod. You'd already figured that out. The engagement isn't technically broken, these things are complicated, but it's certainly on hold until you figure out how to not be a homeless orphan. "I'm sorry about your father," she adds. You nod again. Everyone's sorry about your father. Sorry doesn't bring him back, and it doesn't change the fact that you're about to become someone else's problem. That night, you lie awake listening to the adult voices drifting through the yurt walls. They're discussing you, obviously. What to do with the boy? Send him home to his mother? Keep him until someone claims him? Hope he just wanders off and becomes someone else's responsibility? You're learning your first real lesson in step politics. Loyalty is a luxury that dies with the person who earned it. Your father's friends are about to become your mother's problems, and your mother's problems are about to become yours. The web of alliances that kept your family safe just collapsed, and you're sitting in the wreckage, wondering why no one told you how quickly everything could fall apart. Tomorrow, they'll give you a horse and enough food for the journey home. They'll be polite about it, even kind, but they'll also be relieved to see you go. You represent complications they don't need, and obligations they never signed up for. Your father's death didn't just kill him, it killed the version of the future where you belonged somewhere. You close your eyes and try to remember your father's face, but all you can see is the messenger's expression when he delivered the news, that look of professional sympathy mixed with personal relief that it wasn't his family this time. That's the look you'll remember years later when you're deciding which cities to spare and which to burn. But for now, you're just a 9-year-old boy whose father ate the wrong goat, and tomorrow you're going home to explain to your mother why everything is about to get much, much worse. You arrive home to find your mother chopping wood with the kind of focused intensity that suggests she's imagining faces on every log. Ho-Lun has already heard the news. Bad news travels faster than good news, and news of Yesuge's death had apparently grown wings. She doesn't cry when she sees you. She doesn't even look surprised. She just sets down the axe and pulls you into a hug that feels like armor. "So," she says, "I suppose we're on our own now." The understatement of the century, really. Your father's clan, the Borjigen, had been held together by a combination of respect, fear, and the general understanding that Yesuge was not someone you wanted to cross. With him gone, that understanding evaporated faster than water on hot stones. The tribal council meets without inviting your family. The warriors stop acknowledging your mother's greetings. The other families begin looking through your family like you're made of particularly uninteresting air. You watch it happen over the course of 10 days. 10 days for an entire social structure to collapse. 10 days for your family to go from respected members of the clan to unwanted reminders of what happens when the strong die and leave the weak behind. The Teichiad, who had been your father's allies and supposedly your family's friends, are the ones who make it official. Their leader, Targutal, arrives at your family's yurt with the kind of smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He's brought several other men with him, not enough to seem threatening, but enough to make it clear that this isn't a social call. "Polan," he says, dismounting from his horse with theatrical courtesy, "we need to talk." Your mother emerges from the yurt, and you can see her spine straighten. She knows what's coming. You all know what's coming. The only question is how politely they'll word it. "The clan has decided," Talgatal continues, "that it would be best if your family found new arrangements. With Yesuge gone, there's no longer a place for you among the Borjigai." The phrase "found new arrangements" is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. What he means is, get out, you're not our problem anymore, and if you freeze to death in the wilderness, well, that's what happens to people who don't have the courtesy to stay useful. Your mother nods, as if this is perfectly reasonable. "I see. And our possessions?" "The horses belong to the clan," Targatol says, not meeting her eyes. "The sheep as well? You may keep your personal effects, of course. We're not monsters." "Of course not. They're just taking everything that might keep you alive and calling it generosity, that they're letting you keep your clothes. Your younger siblings, Kasar, Kachun, Temug and little Temüjin, cluster around your mother like chicks around a hen. They're too young to fully understand what's happening, but they understand the tone. They understand that the adults are using their polite voices, which is somehow worse than if they were shouting. "How generous," your mother says, and there's something in her voice that makes Togatel shift uncomfortably. "And I suppose you'll be dividing my husband's herds among yourselves?" "The clan will manage them appropriately," he replies, which is politician speak for, "Yes, we're stealing everything and we're going to enjoy it." You want to say something. You want to point out that your father died serving these people, that he'd given his life for their stupid feuds and their stupid honor. You want to remind them that just last month they were drinking his wine and praising his wisdom. But you're 9 years old, and 9-year-olds don't get to have opinions about adult hypocrisy. Your mother packs what they'll let her take: some clothes, a few cooking pots, her sewing kit, and a small bag of dried meat that won't last a week. The children help in the way children help, by getting in the way and asking questions no one wants to answer. Where will you go? What will you eat? Why are the adults being mean? "We'll figure it out," your mother says over and over. It becomes her mantra, her prayer, her lie. "We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out." The Taiyichiud don't stick around to watch you leave. They've got stolen livestock to count and consciences to ignore. They ride off with the satisfied air of people who've just solved a problem by making it someone else's. Your mother loads the few possessions you're allowed to keep onto a single pack horse. The oldest, lamest horse in the herd, naturally. The one they probably would have killed for meat before winter anyway. Their generosity knows no bounds. You walk away from the only home you've ever known, with nothing but the clothes on your back, and the growing understanding that the world is not designed for people like you. The steppe stretches out in all directions, vast and empty, and completely indifferent to your problems. It doesn't care that you're hungry. It doesn't care that you're scared. It doesn't care that you used to be somebody. Your mother leads you toward the Onon River, where the fishing might be good and the sheltered valleys might provide some protection from the wind. It's as good a plan as any, which is to say it's not much of a plan at all. But it's better than sitting in the ruins of your old life, waiting for charity that will never come. As you walk, you notice things you'd never paid attention to before. The way the grass grows differently in different places, the way the wind carries different smells depending on the direction, the way your mother's jaw is set in a line that suggests she's made some kind of decision you're not old enough to understand yet. "Are we going to die?" asks Temüjin, your little sister, with the casual directness of someone too young to know that some questions shouldn't be asked out loud. "Not if I can help it," your mother replies, and there's something in her voice that makes you believe her. Something that suggests she's already started planning for a future that doesn't include the luxury of despair. That night, you camp by the river and eat the last good meal you'll have for a very long time. Your mother portions out the dried meat with mathematical precision, making it clear that every bite is precious. The fire crackles and pops, and somewhere in the distance, you can hear wolves howling. "Listen," your mother says, and you all lean in. "From now on, we survive. That's our job. Not to be comfortable, not to be happy, just to survive. Everything else is luxury." She looks at each of you in turn, making sure you understand. "We eat what we can find, we sleep where we can shelter, we trust no one who doesn't share our fire. And we remember who did this to us." The last part is said quietly, but you hear it clearly. We remember who did this to us. Not forgive, not forget. Remember. You lie awake that night listening to the river and thinking about the fact that 10 days ago you had a father and a future. Now you have nothing but a mother who's harder than the steppe, and a family that's about to learn what the word desperate actually means. The stars above you are the same stars that shone on your father's killers, the same stars that shine on the Taiyichiud as they sleep in beds that used to belong to your family, the same stars that will shine on whatever you become in the years ahead. You don't know it yet, but this is the moment your childhood ends. This is the moment you stop being Temujin the promising young heir and become Temujin the survivor. This is the moment you learn that the only person you can really count on is yourself, and sometimes not even that. Tomorrow, you'll start learning how to live on roots and hope. Tonight, you fall asleep to the sound of your mother sharpening her knife, preparing for a future that will require every edge she can find. You discover that hunger is not just the absence of food, it's a presence unto itself. It sits with you when you wake up. It walks with you through the day. It curls up beside you at night like an unwelcome pet that never quite lets you forget it's there. After 3 weeks of living on the Onon River, you've become intimately acquainted with this new companion. Your mother has developed a talent for finding food in places where food shouldn't exist. She knows which roots won't kill you, which berries are safe, and which small animals are slow enough to catch with bare hands. She turns bark into something resembling bread, and makes soup from bones you're pretty sure weren't bones when she found them. You don't ask questions. Questions are for people who have the luxury of being picky. The fishing is decent when the fish are feeling cooperative, which they rarely are. You've learned to stand motionless in the shallows for hours, waiting for some unsuspecting trout to swim within grabbing distance. Your success rate is roughly equivalent to your chances of spontaneously growing wings, but occasionally the river takes pity on you and provides. Your siblings adapt to starvation with the flexibility of children and the creativity of the desperate. Kachun becomes an expert at catching grasshoppers. Crunchy, but protein is protein. Temujin develops an uncanny ability to spot bird nests, though the birds seem to be getting wiser to his tricks. Little Temüjin, at 4 years old, has appointed herself the family's official taste tester, a job that involves putting everything she finds into her mouth and reporting whether it makes her tongue go numb. You, being the eldest son, get the privilege of the longer foraging trips. You venture further from camp, looking for larger game or better fishing spots or anything that might keep your family alive for another day. These solo expeditions teach you things about yourself that you'd rather not know, like how long you can walk on an empty stomach before your vision starts to blur, like how many times you can fail to catch a rabbit before you start seriously considering eating grass. The loneliness is almost as bad as the hunger. You see other people occasionally, herders in the distance, travellers following the river, but they avoid your family like you're carrying something contagious, which, in a way, you are. You're carrying the contagion of bad luck, of being the kind of people who get abandoned by their own clan. Nobody wants to catch that. Your mother maintains the family's daily routines with military precision. Morning prayers, even though you're starting to wonder if any gods are listening. Lessons for the younger children, even though the only subject that matters now is how not to die today. Evening stories, even though the only story anyone cares about is whether there will be breakfast tomorrow. She never complains, never cries, at least not where you can see her, never admits that this might be hopeless. She just keeps moving forward with the kind of determination that borders on insanity, as if surviving is simply a matter of refusing to acknowledge any other option. You begin to understand that your mother is not like other people. Other people might have given up by now, might have tried to find new husbands or new clans or new ways to not be their own problem. Your mother has dug in like a tick and decided that if the world wants to kill her family, it's going to have to work for it. The winter preparations begin in late summer, and you realize with growing horror that you have no idea how your family is going to survive the cold months. Your mother seems to have a plan, but it involves a lot of digging and gathering and making mysterious calculations that she doesn't share with anyone. She sends you and Kassar out to collect specific types of wood, certain kinds of stones, particular plants that she identifies with the precision of someone who's done this before. "Have you done this before?" you ask her one evening, as she's weaving grass into something that might charitably be called a basket. "No," she says, not looking up from her work. "But I've thought about it. A lot." This is not as reassuring as she probably intends it to be. The other families in the area have started to notice you, not in a good way. You're the ghost family, the ones who shouldn't exist. The reminder that the clan system doesn't actually protect everyone. Some of them look at you with pity, which is bad. Others look at you with suspicion, which is worse. A few look at you with calculation, which is worst of all. You learn to read these looks quickly. Pity means they might throw you scraps if they're feeling generous. Suspicion means they'll watch you to make sure you don't steal anything. Calculation means they're trying to figure out how to profit from your misery. The Murkeys are calculators. They show up in late autumn, just as the first frost is turning the grass brittle. 3 riders, armed but not obviously hostile, riding the kind of horses that suggest they eat better than you do. They dismount near your camp with the casual confidence of people who know they hold all the cards. Their leader is a man named Chilga, and he has the kind of smile that makes you want to count your fingers after shaking his hand. He's heard about your family's situation, he says. He's sorry for your loss. He might be able to help. Your mother emerges from the shelter you've built, calling it a yurt would be optimistic, and greets them with the kind of politeness that has sharp edges. She knows what kind of help men like this offer, and she knows what it costs. We're managing fine, she says, which is such an obvious lie that even the horses look skeptical. Of course you are, Chilka agrees. But winter is coming, and winter is hard on everyone. Perhaps we could discuss some arrangements. The word arrangements hangs in the air like smoke. You don't need to be an adult to understand what he's suggesting. Your mother is still young, still attractive, still capable of bearing children. Your family has nothing to offer but themselves, and he's here to collect. Thank you for your concern, your mother says, but we have no need of arrangements. Chilga nods, as if he expected this answer. Think about it, he says. Winter is long, and children need to eat. We'll be in the area for a few more days. They ride away, but you know they'll be back. Men like Chilga don't make offers they don't intend to collect on. That night, your mother sits you down for a conversation you're not old enough to have. If they come back, she says, you take your siblings and you run. You follow the river south until you find someone who will take you in. What about you? I'll handle them. You know what handle them means. It means your mother is prepared to pay whatever price is necessary to keep her children safe, even if that price is herself. You lie awake that night listening to the wind and thinking about the fact that your family has become a commodity, something to be bought and sold and traded like livestock. Your mother's beauty, your siblings' labour, your own potential as a future warrior, all of it just numbers in someone else's calculation. The Makid don't come back, but their offer lingers like a bad smell. Other men might make similar offers. Other families might have similar ideas about what a desperate woman might accept. Your mother has made it clear that she won't sacrifice her children, but she's also made it clear that she might sacrifice herself. This is unacceptable. You begin to understand that survival isn't just about finding enough food or staying warm enough to live through winter. It's about maintaining the right to make your own choices, to refuse the deals that turn you into someone else's property. It's about staying human in a world that keeps trying to turn you into a thing. You're 11 years old, and you're learning that the world is full of people who see weakness as opportunity and desperation as invitation. You're learning that being hungry is bad, but being helpless is worse. You're learning that sometimes the only thing standing between your family and absolute disaster is your mother's willingness to do whatever it takes and your own growing determination to make sure she never has to. The first snow falls 3 days later, and you realize that winter is about to teach you lessons you're not ready to learn, but ready or not, you're going to learn them, because the alternative is death, and death is the only surrender your mother has taught you to never accept. You're 12 now, and you've learned that sharing is not actually caring, when the thing being shared is barely enough to keep one person alive, let alone 6. The winter has been educational in ways that no one warns you about in fairy tales. You've learned that your little sister makes a particular sound when she's too hungry to sleep. You've learned that your mother's jaw clicks when she's pretending she's not hungry, so the children can eat. You've learned that your half-brother Bekter has some very interesting ideas about family hierarchy and resource distribution. Bekter is older than you by about 2 years and several degrees of arrogance. He's Yesuge's son by a different wife, which makes him your brother in the technical sense, but not necessarily in the "we're all in this together" sense. He's taken it upon himself to become the family's self-appointed leader, a role that apparently comes with certain privileges regarding food allocation. It starts small. An extra portion of dried meat when your mother isn't looking, the best spot by the fire, the last bit of broth when everyone else has finished eating. Small things that add up to big things when you're living on the edge of starvation. You notice because you're the kind of person who notices things. Kassar notices too, though he's better at pretending he doesn't. Your younger siblings are too small to understand the mathematics of survival, but they understand that they're still hungry after meals, and that Bechter somehow isn't. The breaking point comes on a day when the fishing has been particularly bad, and the foraging has turned up nothing but roots that taste like disappointment. Your mother has managed to catch a fish. One fish, barely big enough to feed 2 people properly, let alone 6. She divides it with the precision of a surgeon, making sure everyone gets something, even if that something is mostly bones and the memory of protein. Bechter eats his portion, and then reaches for yours. "You're not that hungry," he says, as if he's doing you a favour by making this decision for you. "You can wait until tomorrow." You look at the piece of fish in your bowl. It's not much, a few flakes of meat and some skin that's more hope than substance. But it's yours. Your mother portioned it out specifically for you, and you've been looking forward to it with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for religious experiences. "I'm hungry," you say, which is possibly the most unnecessary statement ever made by anyone, anywhere. "We're all hungry," Bechter replies, taking your bowl anyway. "But I'm older, and I need more food to maintain my strength. For the family." The phrase "for the family" is particularly galling, considering that the family seems to include everyone except the people who are actually giving up their food. But you're 12 and he's 14, and 14 beats 12 in the same way that 2 years of additional muscle beats moral outrage. You watch him eat your fish. You watch him chew it slowly, deliberately, making sure you understand that this is how power works. This is how the strong survive and the weak don't. This is your education in the realities of leadership, Bechter style. Your mother returns from gathering firewood to find you sitting, empty-handed, while Bechter finishes what used to be your dinner. She doesn't say anything, but something in her face goes very still. She's been careful not to take sides between her children. But there's only so much family harmony you can maintain when one family member is stealing food from the others. "There wasn't enough," Bechter explains to her, which is true but irrelevant. There's never enough, that's not the point. Your mother nods and starts preparing what she calls soup, and what everyone else recognizes as hot water with optimistic intentions. She doesn't scold Bechter, but she also doesn't meet his eyes. She's calculating something, and you're beginning to suspect it's not the recipe for optimistic soup. That night, you lie awake thinking about fish and fairness and the way power works when there's no one around to enforce the rules. The stranger is stronger than you, but not by much. He's older, but not by enough to matter. He's your brother, but apparently that's a relationship that only works in one direction. You think about your father, who would have sorted this out with a few words and possibly a strategic slap. You think about the clan elders, who would have had opinions about resource sharing and family obligations. You think about all the adults who used to mediate these sorts of conflicts, and who are now either dead or pretending your family doesn't exist. The next morning, you and Kassar go hunting. Hunting is a generous term for wandering around hoping to find something edible that's too slow to escape. But it gets you away from camp and gives you a chance to discuss family politics without being overheard. "He's getting worse," Kassar says, which is an understatement roughly equivalent to calling the ocean damp. "I know. Mother won't do anything about it." "I know that too." "To see what do we do?" You don't answer immediately because you're not sure you want to say what you're thinking out loud. What you're thinking is that there are 6 people in your family and only enough resources for maybe 4, and that mathematics is going to solve itself one way or another. What you're thinking is that Bechter has made a decision about who deserves to survive, and it's not necessarily the decision you would make. What you're thinking is that sometimes problems solve themselves, and sometimes problems need help solving themselves. "Remember how you ate it," you say eventually. Kassar looks at you with the kind of expression that suggests he understands exactly what handle it means, and is not entirely opposed to the idea. You spend the morning actually hunting, mostly because you need to think, and movement helps with thinking. You don't catch anything, but you do formulate a plan. It's not a good plan, but it's a plan, and right now that's better than nothing. The opportunity comes 2 days later. Your mother has managed to snare a rabbit, an actual rabbit with actual meat, the kind of windfall that makes everyone's mouth water just thinking about it. She's preparing to divide it when Bektair announces that he's claiming the rabbit for himself. "I caught it," your mother says. Which is both true and apparently irrelevant. "I'm the head of this family now," Bektair replies, which is neither true nor relevant, but is definitely audacious. "The rabbit is mine." You look at your little sister, who hasn't had proper meat in weeks. You look at your brothers, who are starting to look like the kind of thin that doesn't bounce back. You look at your mother, who is holding a rabbit that could feed everyone if divided properly, or could feed one person very well if claimed by a selfish half-brother who apparently thinks leadership means taking the biggest portion of everything. You look at Khazar and he looks back at you, and somehow you both understand that this conversation is over, and the next conversation is going to involve significantly less talking. You wait until evening, when Bektair goes to check the horse. The horse is fine. It's always fine, because a dead horse means everyone walks, and everyone walking means everyone dies. But checking the horse is something responsible people do, and Bektair likes to think of himself as responsible. You and Kesar follow him, not threateningly, just two younger brothers who happen to be walking in the same direction. You're carrying your bows, because you always carry your bows when you leave camp, just in case you see something worth shooting. You find something worth shooting. Bektair is kneeling beside the horse, checking its hooves for stones or splits or whatever people check hooves for. He's focused on his task, confident in his safety, secure in his position as the unquestioned leader of a family that never actually elected him to anything. You draw your bow. So does Kesar. The arrows are aimed at Bektair's back, right between the shoulder blades, at the spot where the heart keeps all the blood that's supposed to be circulating through the body. "Bektair," you say. He turns around, sees the drawn bows, sees the expressions on your faces, and immediately understands that this is not a family meeting he's going to enjoy. "What are you doing?" he asks, which is a reasonable question under the circumstances. "What we have to do," you reply, which is not really an answer, but is definitely a philosophy. You're expecting him to argue, to negotiate, to promise that he'll share the food better in the future. You're expecting him to appeal to family loyalty or brotherly love, or some other concept that might have mattered when you weren't slowly starving to death. Instead, he sits back on his heels and looks at you with something that might be respect. "So," he says, "you're finally growing up." Then he closes his eyes and waits. You release the arrow. So does Khazar. The shots are clean, quick, and final. Bektair falls forward without making a sound, and suddenly your family has one less mouth to feed and one less person to share the rabbit with. You stand there for a moment, looking at your half-brother's body and waiting to feel something. Guilt, maybe. Regret. The kind of emotional response that people are supposed to have when they kill their siblings. What you feel is relief, and hunger, and the quiet satisfaction of a problem solved. You and Khazar drag the body away from camp, to a place where the scavengers will find it before your mother has to. You don't discuss what happened. You don't make plans for what to say. You just walk back to camp, where your mother is still holding the rabbit and looking at you with eyes that suggest she knows exactly what you've been doing and exactly why you did it. She doesn't ask questions. She just starts preparing the rabbit, dividing it into 5 portions instead of 6. The portions are noticeably larger than they would have been, and everyone eats better than they have in weeks. At night, as you're falling asleep, you think about the fact that you've just killed your brother and that you don't feel bad about it. You think about the fact that this probably makes you a terrible person, or at least a person who makes terrible decisions. Then you think about the fact that everyone in your family is going to sleep with full stomachs tonight, and you decide that being terrible is a luxury you can't afford. Being alive is more important than being good, and being good is more important than being dead. You're 12 years old, and you've just learned that family is only as strong as the people who protect it. And sometimes protecting it means making the kind of choices that keep everyone else alive. You fall asleep thinking about rabbit stew and wondering what other problems might need solving in the weeks ahead. Word travels fast on the steppe, especially when the word is fratricide. You discover this 3 days after Bektair's death, when a group of Taichiud warriors rides into your camp with the kind of casual authority that suggests they've been planning this visit for a while. Their leader is Targutal, the same charming individual who evicted your family from the clan in the first place. He's brought 5 other men with him, all armed, all mounted, all wearing the kind of expressions that suggest this is not a social call. They dismount and arrange themselves around your family's pathetic excuse for a camp with the practiced efficiency of people who've done this before. "Holan," Targutal says, dismounting with theatrical courtesy. "We've heard some disturbing news about your family. Disturbing and actionable." Your mother emerges from the shelter, and you can see her spine straighten in that way that means she's preparing for battle. She knows why they're here. Everyone knows why they're here. The only question is how they're going to phrase the accusations, and how creative they're going to get with the punishment. "Targutal," she replies, and her voice could cut glass. "How thoughtful of you to visit. I assume this isn't about renewing old friendships. Your son," Targutal continues, gesturing in your direction, "has been accused of murdering his brother. This is a serious crime, Hoylun. It requires investigation." The word investigation is doing a lot of work there. What he means is, we've already decided he's guilty, and now we're here to collect him. The trial, if you can call it that, apparently happened somewhere else, with people who weren't there, based on evidence they didn't see. "Eftia's missing," your mother says carefully. "Missing is not the same as murdered." "Missing brothers don't usually leave bloodstains," Targutal replies, which suggests that someone has been doing more investigating than they're admitting to. And they certainly don't leave behind arrows with distinctive fletching. You mentally curse yourself for not being more careful about the arrow recovery. Apparently, leaving evidence at crime scenes is frowned upon, even when the crime scene is justified homicide in defense of rabbit-sharing protocols. "Boys," Targutal says, and his men start moving with the kind of coordinated purpose that suggests this conversation is over and the collection phase is beginning. Your mother steps between you and the warriors, which is either very brave or very stupid, depending on how you feel about futile gestures. "He's just a child," she says, which is technically true, but strategically questionable. "He's old enough to kill," Targutal replies. "That makes him old enough to face the consequences." The consequences, it turns out, involve a lot of rope and a complete disregard for your personal comfort. They bind your hands behind your back with the kind of thoroughness that suggests they've done this before and learned from experience that boys your age are surprisingly good at escaping from inadequate restraints. Your siblings watch in silence as you're loaded onto a horse like a sack of grain. Kassar looks like he wants to say something, but your mother catches his eye and shakes her head, almost imperceptibly. "Smart woman. 1 missing son is a tragedy, 2 missing sons is a pattern that might require additional investigation." "We'll take good care of him," Targutal says to your mother, with the kind of smile that suggests his definition of good care involves significantly more suffering than most people would consider appropriate. The ride back to the Taichiud camp is educational in the worst possible way. You learn that horses are much less comfortable when you can't use your hands to balance. You learn that rope burns are exactly as unpleasant as they sound. You learn that your captors have a surprisingly extensive vocabulary of insults related to patricide, fratricide, and general family dysfunction. The Taichiud camp is exactly what you'd expect from people who specialize in taking other people's livestock and calling it justice. It's well organized, well defended, and populated by the kind of men who look at a bound 13-year-old and see either entertainment or target practice. They throw you into a yurt that's been specifically designated for guests of the prisoner variety. It's dark, cramped, and smells like previous occupants who may or may not have left voluntarily. The floor is bare earth, the walls are felt and leather, and the only light comes from a small smoke hole that's too high to reach and too small to escape through, even if you could reach it. Your guard is a man named Sorkin, and he has the kind of face that suggests he's been hit with many blunt objects over the years and has developed a philosophical acceptance of violence as a normal part of daily life. He's also, you discover, the closest thing to a sympathetic character in this entire situation. "Nothing personal, boy," he says as he checks your bonds. "But orders are orders, and orders say you stay put until they decide what to do with you." "What are they planning to do with me?" you ask, which seems like a reasonable question under the circumstances. Sorkin shrugs. Depends on their mood mostly. Could be exile, could be execution, could be something creative, involving horses and rope, and probably more pain than you're prepared for. This is not as reassuring as he probably intends it to be. You spend the first day testing the limits of your imprisonment. The ropes are professionally tied by someone who clearly went to rope tying school and graduated with honours. The yurt walls are thick enough to muffle sound, but not thick enough to prevent you from hearing the conversations outside, which mostly involve your captors discussing your fate with the kind of casual indifference usually reserved for deciding what to have for dinner. The food situation is about what you'd expect from people who kidnapped you for sport. They bring you water twice a day, and something that might charitably be called food once a day, usually in the evening, usually consisting of whatever scraps are left over from their own meals. It's not enough to keep you strong, but it's enough to keep you alive, which suggests they haven't decided whether you're worth keeping yet. On the third day, everything changes. You're lying on the floor practicing the art of being unconscious while awake when you hear voices outside the yurt. Not the usual guard rotation or mealtime conversation, but something urgent and conspiratorial. Someone is arguing with Sorkin about something, and Sorkin is arguing back with the kind of vehemence that suggests the conversation involves principles he actually cares about. "Just a boy," Sorkin is saying. "Boy or not, he killed his brother," comes the reply. That's not something you overlook. Maybe his brother needed killing, Sorkin suggests, which is surprisingly progressive thinking from someone whose job involves guarding prisoners. That's not for us to decide, isn't it? There's a long pause, and then footsteps walking away. More arguments, further off, involving more people. You can't make out the words, but you can hear the tone, and the tone suggests that your case has become more complicated than anyone anticipated. Sorkin enters the yurt later that evening with your usual meal and an unusual expression. He looks like someone who's been wrestling with his conscience and has decided to let his conscience win for once. "Boy," he says, setting down the bowl of whatever it is, "can you swim?" This seems like an odd question under the circumstances, but you nod anyway. "Good," he says, "because tonight you're going to get very wet." He explains the plan in whispers. The camp is divided about what to do with you. Half the warriors want to execute you as an example. Half want to ransom you back to your mother for whatever she might be able to scrape together. A few, led by Sorkin, think that kidnapping children is bad for the clan's reputation, and that letting you escape might solve everyone's problems. "There's a stream about 200 yards north of camp," Sorkin explains. "Follow it downstream for maybe a mile, then cut east toward the Onon River. If you can make it to the river, you can follow it home." "Why are you helping me?" you ask, which seems like the kind of question that deserves an answer. Sorkin is quiet for a moment. "Because I had a brother once," he says finally, "and he was a bastard who deserved everything he got. Doesn't mean I wanted to watch him die, but it doesn't mean I mourned him either." He cuts your bonds with a knife that's been sharpened to the kind of edge that suggests he takes his cutting seriously. Your hands are numb from 3 days of restricted circulation, but feeling returns quickly, along with the ability to make fists and the desire to use them. "They'll know you helped me," you point out. "They'll suspect," Sorkin corrects. "Suspecting and knowing are different things. Besides, I'm too old to care what people think about my career choices." He leads you to the back of the yurt, where he's carefully loosened the felt panels enough to create an exit that won't be noticed unless someone is specifically looking for it. The night outside is dark and cold, with the kind of overcast sky that makes navigation challenging but concealment easy. "Remember," Sorkin whispers, "north to the stream, downstream to the river, east toward home. And, boy?" "Yes. Next time you kill a brother, burn the arrows." You slip out into the night with nothing but the clothes on your back and the growing understanding that the world contains more decent people than you'd been led to believe. Not many more, but some. And sometimes, some is enough. The stream is exactly where Sorkin said it would be, and it's exactly as cold as you'd feared it would be. You wade into water that feels like liquid winter and start moving downstream with the current, trying to balance speed with stealth, and mostly failing at both. Behind you, the Taichi Hood camp sleeps on, unaware that their prisoner has just become their former prisoner. Ahead of you lies a mile of freezing water, several more miles of hostile territory, and the slim hope that you can make it home before hypothermia or recapture kills you. You're 13 years old and you've just learned that kindness exists in unexpected places, that enemies sometimes have consciences, and that escape is always possible if you're willing to get cold enough and desperate enough to make it work. You swim downstream through water that numbs your hands and feet, thinking about the fact that 3 days ago you were a prisoner facing execution, and now you're a fugitive facing freedom. The change happened because one guard decided that some things matter more than following orders, and that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that gets you in trouble. You make a mental note to remember Sorkin's name in case you ever get the chance to return the favour. You also make a mental note to never again leave evidence at crime scenes, because apparently people notice these things. The water carries you toward home, toward your family, toward whatever comes next in a life that's becoming increasingly complicated and decreasingly predictable. But at least it's your life, and you're the one making the decisions about what to do with it. For now, that's enough. You emerge from the Onon River like some sort of waterlogged ghost, shivering and exhausted, but undeniably alive. The current has carried you further than you'd planned, but geography is negotiable when you're fleeing for your life. You're somewhere downstream from your family's camp, which means you get to walk home in wet clothes while wondering whether your escape has been discovered yet, and whether the Taichi are already organizing a search party. The reunion with your family is everything you'd expect from people who've been wondering whether you were dead or just temporarily inconvenienced. Your mother takes one look at your waterlogged appearance and immediately begins the process of warming you up, drying you off, and feeding you something that almost resembles actual food. Your siblings cluster around you with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for religious miracles, asking questions you're too tired to answer properly. "Did they torture you?" asks Temujin, with the morbid curiosity of someone too young to understand that torture is not actually entertaining. "Where are you going to be executed?" adds Kachun, as if this is the kind of casual conversation topic that normal families discuss over dinner. "Did you see any good horses?" asks little Temujin, because apparently her priorities remain refreshingly practical, even in crisis situations. You answer their questions as best you can while your mother examines you for injuries, malnutrition, and signs of permanent psychological damage. She doesn't find any injuries worth mentioning, but the malnutrition was already there, and the psychological damage is probably too subtle to detect without professional consultation. "We need to move," your mother says once she's satisfied that you're not going to die immediately. "If they're looking for you, they'll check here first." This is undeniably true, but also depressingly familiar. Your family has become expert at the art of strategic relocation, though strategic might be too generous a term for running away from people who want to hurt us. Still, you've gotten good at packing quickly and travelling light, mostly because you don't have much to pack and nowhere particular to go. The next few months blur together in a series of temporary camps, hasty departures, and the ongoing challenge of staying ahead of people who might or might not be looking for you. Your mother has developed a network of contacts among the families who are too poor, too isolated, or too indifferent to care about clan politics. They provide occasional shelter, occasional information, and occasional meals in exchange for labour, stories, or simply the entertainment value of your family's ongoing drama. You spend your 14th winter in a valley that's too remote for most people to bother visiting, and too poor to support anyone permanently. It's the kind of place where survival is a daily negotiation with landscape, weather, and the increasingly urgent question of whether you're going to make it through to spring. But something has changed in you during these months of running and hiding and wondering whether each camp will be your last. The boy who killed his brother for hoarding food has evolved into someone harder, quieter, more calculating. You watch everything now, the way people move, the way they speak, the way they look at your family when they think no one is paying attention. You're learning to read the subtle signs that indicate whether someone is trustworthy, hostile, or simply indifferent. You're learning to identify the people who might help you and the people who definitely won't. Most importantly, you're learning to distinguish between the enemies who are dangerous and the enemies who are merely inconvenient. Spring brings visitors. Not the Taichiud, who seem to have given up active pursuit in favour of maintaining a standing bounty on your head. Not the Merkids, who presumably have other women to harass. These are different visitors, men who remember your father, who knew your family when it mattered, who have been watching your survival with something that might be described as professional interest. Their leader is Togrul, Kahn of the Keret, and he's the kind of man who makes decisions based on long-term strategic thinking rather than short-term emotional satisfaction. He's heard about your escape, your survival, your general refusal to die when dying would be more convenient for everyone involved. He finds this intriguing. Yasuge's son, he says, looking at you with the kind of appraisal usually reserved for horses and weapons. You've grown up interesting. This is not exactly a compliment, but it's not exactly an insult either. It's the kind of observation that suggests he's thinking about something you're not quite old enough to understand yet. Your mother handles the diplomacy with the skill of someone who's learnt to navigate conversations where the wrong word could mean the difference between alliance and annihilation. She explains your family's situation with just enough detail to demonstrate need and just enough pride to avoid seeming desperate. She mentions your father's service, your family's loyalty, your own potential. Togrul listens with the patience of someone who's used to hearing sob stories and making calculations about which ones might be worth investment. He asks questions about your escape, your plans, your understanding of the political situation. He seems particularly interested in your thoughts about the Taichiud, the Merkids, and the general state of tribal warfare. You answer carefully, aware that you're being tested but not entirely sure what the test is supposed to measure. Intelligence, loyalty, strategic thinking, the capacity for violence when violence is necessary. All of the above? The boy has potential, Togrul finally says to your mother, as if you're not standing right there. With proper guidance, he could become useful. Useful is not the career aspiration most parents have for their children, but under current circumstances, useful sounds like paradise compared to dead or permanently fugitive. The alliance, when it comes, is tentative and conditional. Togrul will provide some protection, some resources, some connections to the broader network of tribal politics. In exchange, your family will provide loyalty, service, and whatever unique talents you might develop over time. It's not adoption, but it's not abandonment either. It's the kind of practical arrangement that acknowledges reality while leaving room for future renegotiation. You spend the summer learning things that sons of minor Khans are supposed to know, but that orphaned fugitives usually don't get the chance to study. Horse breeding, weapons maintenance, the subtle art of reading weather, terrain, and human nature. The less subtle art of making people do what you want them to do without actually threatening them. Your education includes lessons in subjects that aren't usually taught to children, but that seem relevant to your particular circumstances. How to identify poison in food. How to sleep lightly enough to wake up if someone approaches your camp. How to kill people quickly and quietly when killing people becomes necessary. Leadership, Togrul explains during one of these educational sessions, is not about being the strongest or the smartest or the most beloved. It's about being the person other people follow when following someone is the difference between living and dying. You nod as if this makes perfect sense, though you're beginning to suspect that leadership might also involve being the person other people fear to disobey. The distinction seems important, though you're not quite sure why yet. As autumn approaches, you realize that something fundamental has shifted in how people see you. You're no longer just the boy who escaped from the Taichiod. You're no longer just Yasuge's son or Holun's eldest child. You're becoming something new. Someone who commands attention, not because of who your father was, but because of who you're becoming. The other young men in Togrul's camp watch you with a mixture of curiosity and caution. They've heard the stories about your brother, your escape, your family's survival against impossible odds. They've seen you practice with weapons, seen you handle horses, seen you listen to conversations and ask the kinds of questions that suggest you understand more about politics than most adults. They're beginning to suspect that you might be dangerous. They're right. But danger, you're learning, is not the same thing as evil. Danger is simply the capacity to change things, to make choices that matter, to refuse to accept the world as it is, when the world as it is includes too much suffering and too little justice. Winter comes early that year, but you're ready for it. Your family has shelter, food, protection, and the kind of security that comes from being useful to powerful people. Your siblings are growing up with opportunities you never had. Your mother sleeps better at night, knowing that her children are less likely to starve or freeze or disappear in the darkness. You lie awake sometimes thinking about the path that brought you here, the father who died trusting the wrong people, the clan that abandoned you when abandonment meant death, the brother who chose selfishness over survival, the enemies who underestimated your capacity for both escape and revenge. All of it has led to this moment, this place, this version of yourself that you're still learning to recognize. You're 15 now, and you're no longer the frightened child who watched his world collapse around a poisoned bowl of mutton. You're not yet the man who will reshape the world according to his own vision, but you're something in between. Something that watches and waits, and plans and prepares for opportunities that haven't arrived yet but definitely will. The wind outside carries the scent of snow and the promise of winter, but also something else. Something that might be the future, approaching at the speed of melting ice and growing ambition. You close your eyes and listen to the sound of possibility humming in the darkness, planning itself into existence one careful decision at a time. The steppe is vast and patient, and full of people who think they understand how power works. They're about to learn that understanding and controlling are very different things, and that the boy who survived starvation and betrayal and the casual cruelty of people who should have known better is no longer interested in simply surviving. But that's a story for another night, when the wind carries different promises and the stars arrange themselves into patterns that spell out conquest instead of mere endurance. For now, it's enough to be warm, fed, and alive in a world that tried very hard to make you dead. It's enough to know that your family is safe, and your enemies are still underestimating you, and the future is approaching like a storm that hasn't quite decided what kind of destruction it wants to leave behind. Sleep well, little storm. Tomorrow you start building an empire. Tonight you rest and dream of horses and weather, and the particular satisfaction that comes from proving that the world was wrong about what you were capable of surviving. The fire crackles and settles into embers. The wind whispers secrets across the felt walls. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howl at stars that have watched this story before, and will watch it again, in different forms with different names, but always with the same lesson. Never underestimate the boy who learned to share his hunger but keep his anger. Good night from the steppe, where patience is a weapon and memory is a map to tomorrow's victories. Sleep well, little conqueror. The world is waiting.